You steal that bike? Or are you just holding it for someone who can afford it? Sergeant Mark Ellison's voice cut through the morning traffic before Naomi Brooks had even removed her helmet. The black Superbike stood angled against the curb, its engine ticking softly beneath her like a cooling animal, dark paint beaded with mist from the early Baltimore air. 2 patrol cars boxed her in on East Pratt Street, red and blue lights washing over the glass towers, the coffee shops, the passing buses, the faces already turning toward her. Naomi had been riding exactly 35 miles per hour in a 35 zone. Both hands steady, jacket zipped to the throat, visor down, mind fixed on the old brick precinct 6 blocks ahead. It was supposed to be her first morning there. Quiet. Observational. Unannounced. She had wanted to see the district before anyone straightened their collars for the new captain. Now she sat with one boot planted on the asphalt, the other still resting on the peg, while 3 uniformed officers studied her as if the machine beneath her were evidence instead of transportation. Ellison stepped closer, broad shoulders squared, silver hair trimmed tight, one hand resting on his belt with the lazy confidence of a man used to being obeyed. His eyes moved from the custom exhaust to the matte black helmet in Naomi's hands, then to her face. Something in his expression changed, not surprise exactly, but confirmation of an old story he had already told himself before she spoke. "License and registration," he said. Naomi unzipped the inside pocket of her jacket slowly, every movement careful, visible, controlled. The city smelled of rain, hot brake pads, and roasted coffee drifting from a corner cafe where a young barista had stopped wiping the window. A woman at the bus shelter lifted her phone, not high, just enough. Naomi noticed. Ellison noticed too, and his jaw tightened. "Step off the bike," he ordered. Naomi looked at the painted lane marker beside her tire, then back at him. Her voice came calm, low, almost too steady for the scene gathering around them. "What was the reason for the stop, Sergeant?" One of the younger officers shifted behind him. Officer Daniel Reeves, according to the nameplate, barely 25, clean-cut, nervous around the eyes. His body camera blinked red against his chest. Ellison gave a short laugh, the kind that invited others to join but warned them not to think. "Reason," he said. "A bike like this weaving through downtown at rush hour, rider covered head to toe, no visible business around here. That's enough for me." Naomi did not look away. "I wasn't weaving. I signaled every lane change. Your camera should show that." The words landed softer than an accusation, but sharper than defiance. The young officer glanced down at his own camera as if it had suddenly become heavy. Ellison tapped one knuckle against the fuel tank, not hard, but with ownership he had not earned. "You always this educated during traffic stops?" Naomi's fingers tightened once around her gloves. Not from fear. From memory. There were children in this city who learned early how quickly a normal morning could turn into a lesson about where people thought you belonged. She had been one of them, sitting in the back seat of her father's old Buick while another officer, another road, another set of flashing lights taught her that dignity could be tested before breakfast. She had carried that lesson into the academy, into internal affairs, into every room where people mistook quiet for weakness. And now here she was, on the first day of a command no one on this sidewalk knew she had earned, being measured by a man who saw skin before conduct. "I know the law," she said. "That shouldn't bother you." Reeves looked up at her then, and for one brief second Naomi saw conflict cross his face, quick as a shadow passing over pavement. Ellison saw it too. His tone hardened. "Hands where I can see them." Naomi lifted both hands slowly, palms open beside the handlebars. The Superbike's mirrors reflected the patrol lights in broken flashes, red, blue, like a warning the street itself was trying to understand. A delivery driver slowed his van. A man in a suit stopped beneath an awning. Somewhere behind them, a bus side at the curb. The whole block seemed to lean closer. Ellison stepped into Naomi's space, lowering his voice just enough that the phones might not catch every word, but she would. "People like you get one nice toy and start thinking the rules bend for you." Naomi held his stare through the damp morning air. Her reply was quiet enough to make him listen. "No, Sergeant. People like me learn the rules because people like you keep changing them." The silence that followed was not empty. It was loaded, metallic, humming under the soft tick of the Superbike's cooling engine. Ellison's smile disappeared. Reeves swallowed. The woman at the bus stop raised her phone a little higher. Naomi remained still, her helmet tucked against her side, her chin lifted, her breathing even. She did not know yet how far Ellison would push this, but she knew exactly where it would end. 6 blocks away, inside Precinct 19, where her name was already printed on the captain's office door. Naomi had learned long ago that fear could wear a uniform, but so could courage. That lesson had begun 24 years earlier in the back seat of her father's Buick, a rust-colored sedan with a cracked dashboard and a pine air freshener that never quite covered the smell of engine oil. She had been 12, small enough that her sneakers did not fully touch the floor mat, old enough to understand the look on her father's face when flashing lights filled the rear window. His name was Marcus Brooks, a mail carrier, a church deacon, a man who ironed his work shirts on Sunday nights and still wrote thank you notes by hand. He had been driving Naomi home from a spelling bee she had just won, her little plastic trophy resting in her lap, when a patrol car pulled them over 3 blocks from their apartment. The officer said the car matched a description. Marcus kept both hands on the wheel. He spoke politely. He moved slowly. Naomi remembered the cold air rushing in when the door opened, remembered her father's shoulders stiffening, remembered the way people on the sidewalk watched without stepping closer. Nothing dramatic happened that made the news. No headline. No lawsuit. Just a good man standing beside his own car while his daughter sat frozen inside it, learning that humiliation did not need to be loud to leave a mark. Years later, Marcus would tell her not to hate the badge. Do not let the worst man wearing it decide what it means, he had said. Naomi carried those words like a folded letter inside her chest. They followed her through the police academy, where instructors praised her discipline but questioned her attitude when she asked too many precise questions. They followed her through her first patrol in West Baltimore, where old women on porches watched her cruiser with cautious hope. They followed her into internal affairs, where she reviewed body camera footage until 2 in the morning, listening for the difference between command and contempt, between safety and ego, between a mistake and a pattern. She became known for being fair in a way that made lazy officers nervous. She did not hunt people. She hunted rot. That was why Deputy Commissioner Helen Carter had called her 3 weeks earlier, voice clipped and tired, and placed a sealed folder on a conference table overlooking downtown. Precinct 19, Helen had said, had become a problem no one wanted to name. 17 civilian complaints in 11 months. 6 involving traffic stops. 4 involving black residents who were never charged with anything. 2 complaints vanished after supervisors said the paperwork was incomplete. Sergeant Mark Ellison's name appeared again and again, sometimes as the officer involved, sometimes as the supervisor who cleared the officer involved. Naomi had read every page without speaking. Outside the commissioner's window, Baltimore moved under gray winter light, buses turning, pedestrians hurrying, the harbor shining like dull steel. I want you to take command, Helen said. Officially, the appointment begins Monday. Unofficially, I need you to see what they are before they know what you are. Naomi had understood. The Superbike was not a disguise. It was hers, bought used after years of overtime, rebuilt on weekends in her brother's garage. A machine she loved because it demanded balance, patience, and respect. On a motorcycle, arrogance could get you hurt. In leadership, it could hurt everyone else. That morning, she had chosen to ride through the district before walking into the precinct, to feel the streets instead of just reading reports about them. She had passed corner stores opening their shutters, a crossing guard lifting one hand to schoolchildren, a mural of Thurgood Marshall bright against a brick wall. She had thought of her father then, of how proud he would have been to see her name on a captain's door. Then the sirens came. Now, sitting at the curb with Ellison in front of her and Officer Daniel Reeves hovering behind him, Naomi felt the past and present fold into one sharp line. She was no longer 12. She was not trapped in the back seat. She knew the policy manual, the state code, the department's own stop procedures, and the fragile human cost of ignoring all 3. Ellison saw a black woman on a superbike and built a suspicion around her. Naomi saw a precinct revealing itself before she had even reached the front steps. She lowered her hands only when Ellison allowed it, reached carefully for her wallet, and offered her license between 2 fingers. He took it, glanced at the name and paused for half a heartbeat. Brooks. Naomi watched his eyes move, searching for something to confirm his assumption, and finding only what she had chosen to give him. Her rank was not on that license. Her appointment letter was sealed inside her jacket. Her badge was tucked in an inner pocket, heavy against her ribs, close enough to end this in seconds. But ending it too soon would teach nothing. So she waited. The city hummed around them. Reeves shifted again, uncomfortable in the silence. Ellison handed the license to him without looking back. "Run it," he said. Naomi looked down the street toward the old brick precinct waiting 6 blocks away, its flag barely visible through the mist. Her first test as captain had arrived before roll call, before introductions, before anyone said welcome. And the hardest part was not proving who she was. The hardest part was watching who they became when they thought she was nobody. Precinct 19 had always looked smaller from the outside than it felt to the people trapped under its shadow. The building sat on the corner of Fayette and Hollins, 3 stories of old red brick, narrow windows, and a flagpole that clicked in the wind whenever the metal clips struck the rope. To tourists passing through downtown, it was just another police station. To the residents of the West Side, it was the place where complaints disappeared, where mothers waited too long in plastic chairs, where young men learned to keep receipts for places they had already been, just in case someone with a badge decided memory was not enough. Sergeant Mark Ellison knew that building better than he knew his own house. He had walked through its side entrance for 22 years, carrying black coffee in one hand and certainty in the other. His locker was the third from the end. His name was on 2 commendation plaques in the hallway. Younger officers stepped aside when he passed, not always out of respect, but because Ellison had a way of making disagreement feel expensive. Inside Precinct 19, people called him dependable. Outside, some called him dangerous in the quiet way people use when they are tired of not being believed. Ellison did not think of himself as cruel. That was part of the problem. He thought of himself as practical, old school, allergic to excuses. He believed the city had gone soft, that paperwork had become a weapon against real police, that every civilian with a phone believed they understood the job. When the department announced that a new captain was coming, Ellison had laughed in the break room and leaned back in his chair beneath the buzzing fluorescent lights. "As long as he knows this is not a college seminar," he had said, stirring powdered creamer into coffee that had been sitting too long. Around him, a few officers smiled because smiling was easier than choosing a side. Officer Daniel Reeves had been there too, standing near the vending machine with a half-open bag of pretzels in his hand, listening more than speaking. Daniel was new enough to still polish his boots at night, and still believe every policy had been written for a reason. He had joined the department because his grandfather had been a firefighter and his mother had taught him that public service was supposed to mean service first. But Precinct 19 had its own gravity. It pulled young officers toward silence. It taught them which jokes not to challenge, which reports to skim, which names to avoid repeating. Ellison had trained Daniel on his first week. He had praised him for being alert, corrected him for being too polite, and once told him, "Hesitation gets people hurt." Daniel had carried that sentence around like a warning, even when the thing he hesitated to do was speak up. That morning, before the stop on East Pratt Street, Ellison had already been irritated. The rumor about the new captain bothered him more than he admitted. Deputy Commissioner Helen Carter had bypassed several internal candidates, including men Ellison considered more deserving, men who had spent years in that building, men who knew the rhythm of the streets. No one had shown him a photograph. No one had asked his opinion. All he knew was that someone from Internal Affairs was coming in with reform language and a clean office waiting upstairs. To Ellison, Internal Affairs meant polished shoes, hidden microphones, and people who judged split-second decisions from air-conditioned rooms. He had not considered that the person assigned to judge him might be watching him before lunch. So when he saw the black Superbike glide past his patrol car with a rider in a dark helmet and leather jacket, something in him reached for suspicion before evidence arrived. It was not the speed. It was not the lane change. It was the picture. Expensive machine. Black rider. Downtown corridor. Confidence where he expected apology. He followed first, then activated the lights. Daniel, seated beside him, looked up from the mobile data terminal. "Did we clock a violation?" he asked. Ellison did not answer immediately. He just eased the cruiser forward, eyes fixed on the motorcycle. "We will see," he said. Those 3 words settled inside the patrol car like dust. Daniel felt them. They meant the reason would come later, shaped to fit whatever they found. Now, standing behind Ellison at the curb while Naomi Brooks waited with controlled patience, Daniel felt that same dust in his throat. He had Naomi's license in his hand. The name looked ordinary. The woman did not. She was calm in a way that made the stop feel smaller and more serious at the same time. Dispatch had not yet returned anything. The street watched. Ellison watched Naomi. Naomi watched both of them with the stillness of someone taking notes without writing anything down. For the first time that morning, Daniel wondered whether the new captain everyone had been joking about had already arrived, not through the front doors of Precinct 19, but here at the curb under mist and flashing lights, asking the one question Ellison hated most: why? Dispatch came back clean. And the silence after it made Ellison look angrier than a warning ever could. Naomi heard the faint radio crackle from Daniel Reeves's shoulder, then the calm voice confirming no warrants, valid license, valid registration, insurance current, motorcycle properly titled. Everything lawful. Everything ordinary. But Ellison did not step back. He stared at the license in Daniel's hand as if the plastic had betrayed him. The wet street reflected the patrol lights beneath their feet, turning the curb into a trembling strip of red and blue. Naomi waited 1 second, then 2, giving him the chance to correct course. A good officer would have taken it. Ellison did not. Open the side compartment, he said. Naomi's eyes moved to the small lock storage panel beneath the rear seat. For what purpose? Ellison exhaled through his nose. Because I asked. That is not a legal basis. A murmur moved through the sidewalk. Not loud. Not rebellious. Just enough for Ellison to feel the crowd shift from watching a traffic stop to recognizing something wrong. He turned his head slightly, aware of the phones now lifted near the bus shelter, under the cafe awning, beside the delivery van with its hazard lights blinking. Daniel's face tightened. His body camera kept blinking red. Naomi looked directly at it, then back to Ellison. Sergeant, if you believe there is probable cause, state it clearly. If you are asking for consent, the answer is no. Her voice stayed calm, but the sentence changed the temperature of the morning. Daniel had heard academy instructors say almost the same words in training videos. Consent must be voluntary. Searches needed a reason. Authority was not a shortcut around the Constitution. He had written those answers on exams. He had passed. Now the exam was standing in front of him, wearing a leather jacket and holding her helmet at her side. Ellison took 1 step closer. You think you are smarter than everybody out here? Naomi shook her head once. No. I think everybody out here deserves the same rules. Something flickered across Daniel's face. Shame maybe. Or recognition. Naomi saw it and spoke to him without turning fully away from Ellison. Officer Reeves, you ran my information. You heard dispatch. You saw the stop from the passenger seat. What specific violation did you observe before your sergeant activated the lights? Daniel looked at Ellison first. That was the answer before he said anything. His throat worked. The city seemed to quiet around him. Buses hissing, tires whispering over damp asphalt, the faint rattle of a newspaper box in the wind. Ellison's stare hardened into a command. Daniel looked back at Naomi. I did not personally observe a moving violation, he said softly. The words were not loud, but they landed like a dropped badge. A man beneath the awning whispered, There it is. Ellison turned on Daniel. You let me handle the stop. Daniel's ears went red. Yes, Sergeant. Naomi took a slow breath. She did not smile. A smaller person might have enjoyed that fracture, but she knew what it cost a young officer to tell even a small truth inside a crooked culture. That was the first honest statement made here, she said. Ellison's jaw flexed. Step off the motorcycle and place your helmet on the seat. Naomi did exactly that, carefully, deliberately, giving him no excuse to turn dignity into disorder. Her boots touched the pavement, black leather darkened by mist. She placed the helmet on the seat, visor facing the street like a closed eye. Ellison circled the bike, studying the plates, the tires, the storage panel, searching for a reason that had failed to appear on its own. This your motorcycle? He asked. Yes. Paid for how? The question was so naked that even Daniel looked down. Naomi felt the old heat rise in her chest. The one that came when insult dressed itself as investigation. She let it pass through her without taking control. With money, Sergeant. A few people on the sidewalk reacted under their breath. Ellison's face tightened. Do not get cute with me. Then do not ask questions you would not ask every rider. He stopped in front of her. Close enough now that she could smell the bitter coffee on his breath beneath the rain. You people always make everything about race. Naomi looked past him for a moment, toward the school crossing sign swinging at the corner. The little girl from the bus stop held her mother's hand, her pink backpack pressed against her coat, eyes wide and fixed on Naomi. That was why Naomi kept her voice steady. Not for Ellison. For the child watching what power sounded like. No, Naomi said. People like you make race invisible until someone names what you are doing. Daniel's shoulders dropped as if the sentence had touched something he did not know he was carrying. Ellison pointed toward the patrol car. Enough. You are coming with us until we sort this out. On what charge? Naomi asked. Interfering with an investigation. I am the subject of the stop. Asking for the basis is not interference. Ellison paused, and in that pause, everyone saw the gap between authority and law. Naomi leaned slightly toward Daniel, her tone firm but not unkind. A good officer does not need courage when people are watching. He needs it when his superior is wrong. Daniel looked at the ground. Ellison looked ready to erase the moment by force of command alone. But Naomi stood still in the mist, hands visible, chin level, the Superbike cooling behind her, and every camera on that block kept recording. Ellison's patience broke in a way that did not need volume to feel dangerous. His face went still first, then his shoulders squared, and the air around the curb seemed to tighten. Naomi saw the decision arrive before he spoke it. She had seen that look in complaint videos in deposition rooms, in the pause before an officer chose control over judgment. Turn around, Ellison said. Naomi did not move right away. Sergeant, you have my license, registration, and insurance. Dispatch confirmed all of it. There is no lawful reason to detain me further. Turn around, he repeated, sharper now. Daniel Reeves shifted beside the patrol car, one hand hovering near his notepad as if procedure might save him if he wrote fast enough. Naomi turned her head slightly toward him. Officer Reeves, document the time. Document that dispatch cleared me. Document that I asked for the legal basis. Daniel looked at Ellison, then down at the wet pavement. Ma'am, he said quietly, please just do what he says. The words disappointed her more than anger would have. Not because Daniel sounded cruel, but because he sounded afraid of the wrong person. Naomi placed her helmet fully on the motorcycle seat and turned around with measured calm. Hands visible, fingers relaxed. Ellison stepped behind her and took out his handcuffs. The click of metal opening seemed small against the city, but everyone heard it. The woman at the bus stop pulled her daughter closer. The delivery driver stopped pretending to check his route. A man under the awning lowered his coffee and stared. Naomi felt the cool steel close around one wrist, then the other, not painfully, but firmly enough to leave a memory. The sensation traveled through her like old weather. Her father's hands on the Buick steering wheel. Her own hands on an academy desk. The badge inside her jacket, heavy and silent, waiting. Ellison leaned closer, speaking low enough that only Naomi and Daniel could hear clearly. People like you need to learn respect. Naomi kept her eyes on the reflection of the patrol lights trembling in a rain puddle near the curb. No, Sergeant. People like you need to learn the difference between respect and fear. Daniel's breath caught. Ellison's grip paused for half a second. Then he guided Naomi toward the patrol car with clipped, official movements, the kind that looked clean from a distance and wrong up close. Watch your head, he said, not gently, not harshly, just empty. Naomi lowered herself into the back seat. The vinyl was cold beneath her, and the glass divider smelled faintly of disinfectant and stale air. Through the window she saw her Superbike standing, alone at the curb, black against the silver morning, its mirrors still flashing red and blue. Ellison walked back to Daniel and spoke with his back partly turned to the crowd. Call for a tow. Daniel looked at the bike, then at Naomi through the rear window. Sergeant, her paperwork checked out. We could release her and file a contact report. Ellison's eyes narrowed. Are you supervising this stop now? Daniel straightened. No, Sergeant. Then call it in. Daniel lifted his radio but hesitated before pressing the button. Naomi watched him struggle, and in that quiet hesitation she saw the entire precinct before she ever entered it. Men who knew better, men who looked away, men who let one loud certainty become policy. On the sidewalk, the little girl with the pink backpack raised one hand slightly, not waving exactly, just reaching toward the window with confusion on her face. Naomi lifted her cuffed hands a few inches, palms inward, and nodded once. She wanted the child to see calm, not defeat. She wanted her to understand that being restrained by someone else's mistake did not make you small. Ellison opened the driver's door and slid behind the wheel. Daniel got in on the passenger side, quiet as a reprimand. Rain began to tap softly on the roof, a thin, scattered rhythm. The patrol car pulled away from the curb, leaving the crowd, the phones, the idling Superbike, and the unanswered question hanging in the mist. 6 blocks ahead, Precinct 19 waited with its old brick face and narrow windows. Ellison drove like a man bringing in a problem. Naomi sat behind him like a woman carrying the answer. Inside her jacket, the sealed appointment letter pressed against her side. Beneath it, her badge remained unseen. She could have ended everything on the street. She could have spoken her rank, opened her jacket, watched Ellison stumble backward into apology. But then the precinct would have learned only caution, not truth. So she let the car move through the wet morning, past the coffee shops and bus stops, past the mural of Thurgood Marshall shining through rain, toward the building she had been sent to change. Her wrists ached faintly. Her breathing stayed even. And in the front seat, Daniel Reeves's body camera kept recording every mile. Rain softened the city into glass as the patrol car moved the last 6 blocks toward Precinct 19. Naomi sat behind the divider with her hands cuffed in front of her, the metal resting against the dark leather of her jacket, cold enough to keep her fully present. She watched Baltimore slide past in broken reflections. A bakery lifting its steel gate, a school bus flashing yellow at the corner, a man under a newspaper held over his head, the mural of Thurgood Marshall fading behind a curtain of mist. No one in the front seat spoke. Ellison drove with both hands on the wheel, chin set forward, already arranging the story in his mind so it would sound clean by the time they reached the station. Suspicious rider. Uncooperative subject. Officer safety. Investigation ongoing. Naomi knew the language. She had read it in hundreds of reports where the truth had been sanded down until only the officer's comfort remained. Daniel Reeves sat stiff beside him, one knee bouncing slightly, eyes flicking from the windshield to the body camera light on his chest. The red blink was steady. Red. Dark. Red. Dark. Every blink felt like a heartbeat he could not control. Naomi looked at it through the gap between the seats and wondered whether Daniel understood what he was carrying. Evidence was not just a file. Sometimes it was a mirror. Sometimes it showed a person the exact moment they chose silence. The patrol car turned onto Holland Street, tires whispering over wet pavement. Precinct 19 appeared ahead, square and old, its brick darkened by rain, its front steps slick under the flag that snapped softly in the wind. Naomi had imagined walking through those doors upright, unannounced but free, taking in the room before anyone knew her name. Instead, she arrived in the back of a cruiser, wrists marked by someone else's certainty. The irony did not make her bitter. It made her focus sharper. Ellison pulled into the Sallyport and parked beneath a buzzing fluorescent light. For a moment no one moved. The engine idled, warm air trembling through the vents, the smell of damp uniforms and old vinyl settling. Around them, Naomi lowered her eyes to her hands. The cuffs had left 2 red bands around her wrists, neat and bright against her brown skin. She thought of the little girl at the bus stop, the pink backpack, the frightened eyes. She thought of her father telling her that the badge should never belong to the loudest person in the room. Then she inhaled slowly through her nose and let the breath leave without sound. Ellison opened his door first. Rainwater tapped the roof above Naomi like fingers waiting for an answer. Daniel reached for the rear door, then paused. Through the glass, his face looked younger than it had on the street. "Ma'am," he said quietly when he opened it, "watch your step." The words were simple, almost automatic, but his voice had changed. Less command. More shame. Naomi stepped out carefully. The The concrete floor of the Sally Port smelled of oil, wet rubber, and yesterday's coffee. Somewhere inside, a phone rang twice and stopped. Ellison took her by the elbow without pressure, performing control more than needing it. "Move," he said. Naomi walked. Her boots made soft sounds on the damp floor, steady, even unhurried. Past the inner door, the precinct opened into fluorescent light and stale warmth. A bulletin board sagged under old notices. A row of plastic chairs lined the wall. A tired woman in a gray coat sat near the complaint window with a folder clutched to her chest. She looked up as Naomi entered, saw the cuffs, saw Ellison, then looked down again with the practiced caution of someone who had learned not to expect fairness too quickly. Naomi noticed her. Naomi noticed everything. The scuffed tile. The cracked baseboard near the duty desk. The officers who glanced over and smirked before they knew what story they were seeing. The framed photographs of past captains on the wall, all straight-backed, most of them white, all of them looking out from behind glass as if the building had never belonged to anyone else. Ellison's confidence returned the moment he crossed the threshold. This was his territory, his hallway, his audience. "Brought in a roadside attorney," he announced, loud enough for the room to hear. "Thought she was going to teach us procedure on Pratt Street." A few officers chuckled. Daniel did not. Naomi stood in the center of the room with rain on her shoulders and steel around her wrists, but the silence inside her had become almost peaceful. She was not waiting for rescue. She was waiting for revelation. Behind a closed conference room door at the far end of the lobby, voices murmured. Deputy Commissioner Helen Carter was already inside, reviewing transition files with the command staff, expecting her new captain to arrive any minute. Naomi could see the frosted glass from where she stood. She could see a shadow pass behind it. The moment was close now. The room did not know it yet, but power had already changed hands. It had simply entered quietly in cuffs, carrying the truth with both hands. The first laugh came from behind the duty desk, small and careless, and it died before it could become a second one. Naomi did not look toward it. She kept her eyes on the frosted conference room door, where the shadows inside had stopped moving. Ellison stood beside her with the posture of a man enjoying the room's attention, his thumbs hooked near his belt, his chin lifted just enough to tell everyone he believed this was already settled. "She refused basic instructions," he said to the desk sergeant, loud enough for every officer in the lobby to hear. "Questioned the stop, questioned the search, questioned everything. You would think she graduated from the academy this morning." A few faces turned toward Naomi with lazy amusement. Others looked away, not because they disagreed, but because discomfort was safer when ignored. Daniel Reeves stood 2 steps behind Ellison, rain still darkening the shoulders of his uniform, his body camera blinking red against his chest like a quiet alarm. He opened his mouth once, then closed it. Naomi saw the movement without turning. She understood that kind of silence. It was the silence institutions fed on. Ellison placed Naomi's license on the counter with 2 fingers. "Run her again inside," he said. "Maybe the street check missed something." The desk sergeant reached for it, then froze halfway. From the conference room the door opened. It did not swing hard. It did not slam. It simply opened with a soft click, and the sound changed the room more completely than a shout could have. Deputy Commissioner Helen Carter stepped into the lobby in a navy suit, silver hair pinned back, reading glasses still in one hand. Behind her came 2 command staff members, a lieutenant, and a woman from Human Resources carrying a folder stamped with the city seal. Helen's eyes found Naomi immediately. Then they dropped to the cuffs. The air seemed to leave the precinct all at once. Helen did not rush. She walked forward with the controlled anger of someone who had spent 30 years learning that calm could cut deeper than volume. "Sergeant Ellison," she said. Ellison's expression shifted from pride to professional stiffness. "Deputy Commissioner. We were just processing a roadside detention." Helen stopped 3 feet from Naomi. Her gaze stayed on the red marks beginning to show around Naomi's wrists. "A roadside detention," she repeated. No one moved. The tired woman in the gray coat by the complaint window lifted her head. The desk sergeant slowly removed his hand from Naomi's license. Daniel's breathing had changed. Naomi could hear it behind her, shallow and uneven. Ellison forced a nod. "Yes, ma'am." Subject was stopped near Pratt Street. became argumentative during a lawful inquiry. Helen turned her eyes to him then. Subject. The word landed with ice in it. Ellison blinked. Yes, ma'am. Helen looked back at Naomi, and for the first time since the stop began, her face softened, not with pity but recognition. Captain Brooks, she said. Are you injured? The lobby went silent in a way Naomi had heard only a few times in her career. Not ordinary silence. Not respectful silence. The kind that follows a door opening onto a truth no one prepared for. Ellison's mouth parted slightly. The desk sergeant stared at the license on the counter, as if the name had rearranged itself in front of him. Someone near the hallway whispered, Captain. Naomi held Helen's gaze. Her voice remained even. No, Deputy Commissioner. I am not injured. Helen's jaw tightened. Then why are you in handcuffs? Naomi turned her head slowly toward Ellison. She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. That is a question Sergeant Ellison has been avoiding since East Pratt Street. Ellison's face lost color. Captain Brooks, he said, the title coming out rough, disbelieving, almost too late to be useful. Naomi looked at him fully now. Rain still clung to her jacket. The cuffs still held her hands. But the room had already shifted around her, rearranging its understanding one breath at a time. I am your new police captain, she said. No one laughed. No one reached for paperwork. Even the phone stopped ringing for a moment, or maybe everyone simply stopped hearing them. Daniel Reeves stepped forward first, hands unsteady as he reached for the cuff key on his belt. Captain, I am sorry, he said, voice barely above a whisper. Naomi looked at him, not cruelly, not kindly, but with the weight of exact memory. Take them off, she said. The key turned. The cuffs opened. Metal released skin with a small click that seemed to echo across the lobby. Naomi brought her hands forward and looked at the red bands on her wrists. She did not rub them. She let the room see. Helen faced Ellison again. Sergeant, did you know who she was? Ellison swallowed. No, ma'am. That is not the defense you think it is. The word struck harder than any accusation. Naomi picked up her license from the counter herself, slid it back into her jacket, and removed the sealed appointment letter from the inside pocket. She placed it on the desk beside the badge she finally drew into the light. Gold caught the fluorescent glare. Captain. Precinct 19. The old photographs on the wall seemed to watch from behind their glass. Naomi looked across the room at every officer who had laughed, looked away, or waited for someone else to decide what was right. Good morning, she said quietly. Now we can begin. The lobby did not move after Naomi spoke. It breathed in small, careful pieces, as if every person inside Precinct 19 had suddenly become aware of the floor beneath their shoes, the badge on their chest, and the cameras that had been recording more than they meant to reveal. Naomi slid the appointment letter back into its envelope and placed her badge on the counter not as a weapon but as a fact. Ellison stared at it with the stunned emptiness of a man who had spent years believing rank would always recognize him first. Captain, he said, forcing the word through a dry throat. There has been a misunderstanding. Naomi looked at him for a long moment. The fluorescent light hummed above them. Rain tapped softly against the front windows. Somewhere near the complaint desk, the woman in the gray coat tightened her grip on her folder and watched as if the room had finally started speaking a language she understood. No, Naomi said. There has been a pattern. The sentence settled over the lobby with a weight no one could laugh away. Deputy Commissioner Helen Carter opened the folder in her hand and removed a slim tablet. Before Captain Brooks arrived, she said, her vehicle stop was being monitored by Internal Affairs through Officer Reeves's body camera feed. Daniel's face went pale. Ellison turned toward him, betrayal flashing across his features. Daniel shook his head once, almost helplessly. I did not know it was mirrored, he said. Helen's voice stayed calm. It was authorized this morning as part of the transition review. Captain Brooks requested a live oversight channel during her first district assessment. Naomi did not look satisfied. She did not look victorious. Her eyes were on Ellison, but her mind was on the 17 complaints in the sealed folder, on the people who had sat in that same lobby and left unheard, on the little girl at the bus stop watching steel close around a black woman's wrists. Sergeant Ellison, she said, You will surrender your badge and service weapon to Deputy Commissioner Carter pending administrative investigation. You will not access department systems. You will not contact any complainant, witness, or officer involved in open reviews. Ellison's mouth tightened. You are basing that on one stop? Naomi stepped closer, close enough that he had to meet her eyes, far enough that the whole room could hear. I am basing it on your conduct today, the recorded stop, prior complaints, missing documentation, and your belief that not knowing my title somehow makes what you did acceptable. Ellison looked around, searching for support in the same faces that had once laughed at his break room jokes. No one offered him any. The desk sergeant lowered his eyes. A lieutenant near the hallway folded his arms and said nothing. Daniel stood rigid, shame and relief fighting across his face. Helen held out her hand. After a long second, Ellison removed his badge. The small metal shield looked strangely ordinary in his palm, no louder than a house key, no stronger than the character of the person carrying it. He placed it in Helen's hand. The sound it made was soft, almost disappointing. Naomi turned from him before the silence became spectacle. Officer Reeves. Daniel looked up. Yes, Captain. Step into the conference room in 10 minutes with your full statement. Not the clean version. The true one. His eyes reddened, but he nodded. Yes, ma'am. Naomi's expression softened only slightly. You knew the stop was wrong. Daniel swallowed. I did. And you followed anyway. Yes, ma'am. The admission seemed to cost him more than the entire morning had cost Ellison. Naomi let the room hear it. Then she said, that is where bad departments are built. Not only by officers who misuse power, but by officers who recognize it and stay quiet because silence feels safer. Daniel lowered his head. I am sorry. Naomi glanced toward the complaint window, where the woman in gray sat perfectly still, folder pressed to her chest like a fragile shield. Do not give me a better apology, Naomi said. Give this city a better officer. Daniel looked up then and something in his face changed. Not forgiveness. Not absolution. A burden accepted at last. Naomi faced the entire lobby. The chuckles were gone. The smirks were gone. What remained was discomfort, and discomfort, she knew, could become honesty if held long enough. Effective immediately, she said. All traffic stop reports from the last 12 months will be audited. All civilian complaints marked incomplete will be reopened. Body camera compliance will be reviewed shift by shift. Any officer who thinks this badge exists to protect pride should decide today whether they still belong in this building. No one spoke. Helen Carter watched Naomi with the faintest trace of approval, but Naomi did not need it. She walked to the woman in the gray coat and stopped at a respectful distance. Ma'am, Naomi said gently, have you been helped? The woman looked at the badge on the counter, then at Naomi's wrists still marked red. Her voice came out cautious. I came to file a complaint. Naomi nodded. Then we will take it properly. For the first time since entering Precinct 19, the woman loosened her grip on the folder. Outside, rain kept falling on the Superbike still waiting near East Pratt Street, on the bus shelter, on the streets that had seen too much and been believed too little. Inside, under old lights and older habits, the first repair began not with a speech, but with a chair pulled forward, a pen placed on the desk, and a captain who listened before anyone could disappear again. By late afternoon, the rain had stopped, but the city still shone as if it were holding its breath. Water clung to the windows of Precinct 19 in thin silver lines, catching the pale sun that slipped between the clouds and spread across the lobby floor. The woman in the gray coat had finished giving her statement. Her folder no longer looked like a shield. It lay open on the desk, each page numbered, copied, and signed properly for the first time. Naomi had listened without interruption, asking only the questions needed to make the record clear. When the woman stood to leave, she looked at Naomi's wrists, then at her face. I did not think anyone would believe me, she said. Naomi did not answer quickly. Some sentences deserved room around them. I believe records, she said softly. And I believe people deserve to be heard before they are dismissed. The woman nodded once, held the folder close, and walked out into the clean air after rain. Across the lobby, officers moved differently now. Not perfectly. Not transformed in a single morning. But slower. more aware. The kind of awareness that begins when excuses lose their furniture. Ellison's locker had been sealed by internal affairs. His nameplate still sat on a desk near the squad room, but no one touched it. Daniel Reeves had given his statement in the conference room, not polished, not heroic, just true. He admitted what he saw, what he failed to say, and where fear had made him smaller than the oath he had taken. Naomi did not praise him. Praise would have been too easy. She assigned him to assist with the traffic stop audit under supervision, beginning with the complaints no one had wanted to reopen. You will read every name, she told him. Not case numbers. Names. Daniel nodded, and this time he did not look away. Near 5 o'clock, a tow truck delivered Naomi's Superbike to the precinct lot after Helen Carter made one phone call that sounded polite enough to frighten the towing supervisor. The machine rolled down from the flatbed untouched, black paint reflecting the washed sky, engine quiet, chrome bright with beads of water. Several officers watched from the rear entrance. No one joked. Naomi stood beside the bike for a moment, running one gloved hand over the handlebar, feeling the steady fact of it beneath her palm. Then she looked up at the brick building, at the flag moving above it, at the old windows that had watched too many people enter with hope and leave with less. She carried her helmet inside. Her office was on the second floor, at the end of a narrow hallway lined with photographs of captains who had come before her. The room smelled of old wood, paper and coffee left too long in a machine that needed cleaning. Someone had placed a temporary nameplate on the desk. Captain Naomi Brooks. The letters were black against brushed metal, simple and almost too small for what they meant. Naomi set her helmet beside it. For a while she said nothing. The silence was not empty. It held her father's Buick, the little spelling bee trophy in her lap, the bus stop girl's frightened eyes, the click of cuffs opening in the lobby, the woman in gray finally being heard. She removed her jacket and looked at her wrists. The red bands had faded but not disappeared. She did not cover them. A knock came softly at the door. Daniel stood outside, uniform still damp at the shoulders, a folder tucked under one arm. Captain Brooks, he said, these are the first 6 reopened complaints. I thought you would want them tonight. Naomi studied him for a moment. The hallway light fell across his face, showing exhaustion, embarrassment, and something steadier underneath. Set them on the table, she said. He stepped in, placed the folder down, then hesitated. I should have stopped him, Daniel said. The words did not ask for comfort. That mattered. Naomi looked through the window at the parking lot below, where her Superbike rested beneath the thinning gold of evening. Yes, she said. You should have. Daniel absorbed it without flinching. After a moment, Naomi turned back. So next time do. He nodded, not forgiven completely, not condemned completely, but given the harder thing, responsibility. When he left, Naomi sat behind the desk that now belonged to her, opened the first complaint, and read the name at the top out loud into the quiet room. Outside, sunlight broke through the last cloud and touched the motorcycle, the wet pavement, the front steps, the flag. Downstairs, the phones began ringing again, ordinary and urgent. This time, someone answered on the second ring. Naomi looked once more at the fading marks on her wrists, then at the badge lying beside her helmet. No speech announced the change. No applause made it real. Justice entered the building the way dawn enters a room. Slowly, silently, and then all at once.